So I'll try to keep your attention as best as I can. I don't know if I can follow up on that metal oxide semiconductor technology, but I will do my best. I say I'm an iPad veteran, and I've been working and developing software for iPad for 84 years. And I calculate that carefully because really the iPad's been around for such a short amount of time that we kind of do a dog years kind of calculation. So I started designing for the iPad about 6 months before its debut, and I've been working on the iPad ever since. So I'm calling it 84 years of individual experience developing software for iPad. So I'm going to tell you a little maybe why you'd be listening to me talk about this. This is the part where it's sort of a hashtag shameless self-promotion. Zinio is, at least right now, I think today, the #2 top grossing app for iPad. I of course used the screenshot where it was #1 because why wouldn't I do that? And we're the top grossing news app in I think 50 countries right now. So obviously for us at Zinio, we were waiting for the tablet computer to come and change our business since 2001. We've been waiting a long time for that tablet computer to come. Maybe probably felt like 5 years too long to some of us. But today, what I'm going to talk about is a little bit about how we got here with the iPad, what our approach is like designing magazines and designing applications for the iPad, and where we think magazines are going in the future. And when I become nervous and awkward, it's because I'm presenting Matt Carlson's slides. First, I wanted to talk a little about why I think magazines are so special, and why I think the tablet computer is sort of a renaissance for the magazine in a way. And it's nothing I can really take any credit for. I mean, like when I was a kid, I was one of those. I had my walls plastered with magazines. For me, it was like Transworld Skate and Thrasher magazine, and I had like wall-to-wall skate art, you know, around it. Like the glossy pages of magazines were just were holy to me, you know, growing up. So it was sort of providence that I ended up working in the magazine industry, I think. But magazines are beautiful, you know. We see magazines right now at Zinio as a place where big ideas can still live. Where there's a real form around ideas and design and media and information as a sort of contrast to a lot of what you can find on the internet that's low fidelity, that's not editorial, that's not curated. We have this suggestion that maybe news will break in other places, news will break on the New York Times, but that Zinio is a place where stories can live. And that's why, you know, when I open up a magazine and like you think about the tablet computer is sort of perfect, where that 45 minutes that it takes to read, you know, a magazine from cover to cover, maybe an hour and a half or whatever, it's The Economist and I'm on the Muni, or we really like the idea that it's something that you can sit down and lean back and kind of dedicate yourself to and spend some time kind of investing in. Editorial curation is something that we think we really don't want to dispense with. So the idea that a magazine, you know, so much hard work goes into a magazine, both kind of how it's designed, everything, it's sort of linear structure and hierarchical structure, it's typography, it's art, it's semantics. You know, we really want to kind of, it's not, the print isn't dead, you know, we want to be an agent of the print medium, we want to honor the print medium and take pride in it, you know. And something that's really special, at least when you're on your shiny iPad, is when you open up a magazine to a lead article, and it's big, beautiful, saturated images we think are really powerful on tablet computers. That's why you'll see Apple, for as much as they are, you know, leading with magazines all over the iTunes stores, because it makes their devices look beautiful. And lastly, and I kind of mentioned, the form factor of the magazine itself is obviously so suitable to the tablet computer. You know, it's sort of it's perfect. I mean, not only because a tablet computer is broadsheet and it's tactile. You know, the idea that, you know, I have, because of course I work at Zinio, I have like 3,000 magazines on my iPad. You know, is spectacular. But you know, it's really great when you can sit down and read like a 15,000 word piece of long form journalism from The Economist or Harper's, or, you know, to read a magazine from beginning to end. You know, sans the insert with some, you know, Drakkar Noir smell and the blowouts and everything. Just the content is great on the iPad. This is the part probably where I show some outdated statistics in a room full of like media and tablet people. I kept correcting these slides, you know, thinking that like at some point I had it nailed, but I guess that's true. In 2010, there were 15 million iPads sold, and 28 million will be sold. No, I think that's a that's a real undershot. And in 2012, it's like a Virgilian. I really don't even know anymore. But I think that this is the part where, you know, Apple secedes the US government or something. I'm not sure what's going to happen in 2012. Similarly, we have a lot of discipline working with the sort of broader, you know, tablet diaspora right now, the OEMs with Google, with all these people kind of rushing to create big solutions for consumers, and it's none of it's really settled yet, but it's a really fun space, obviously, to work in. But the tablet device, obviously, was perfect for publishers. It's sort of this, the way we see it, for publishers that have digital strategies and sometimes semi-unprofitable websites that are like essentially vanity places for their you know, fulfillment services. The tablet device was this idea that the digital strategies of all of these publishers could finally begin to pay off. And the way I always see it is a sort of perfect intersection of what they do well in print, what they would do well on the web finally has this sort of a medium, and we think that's pretty special. So real briefly, I wanted to talk about what happened when, in what I guess was the winter of 2010, we were approached by Apple with a select group of sort of media companies and software development companies to work on this crazy new iPad that they were coming out with. And what essentially happened is, it's fine. What essentially happened is we got locked in a room in our offices with a few iPads chained to desks, literally, inside these big sort of steel cases. And we had the challenge of basically building an app for the iPad that would be the first magazine reading app for the device in 6 weeks. And our idea was that we were going to do everything, of course, because all the design and experience design people are like, all right, this thing's got to be amazing, right? But it has to debut in 6 weeks on April 3rd, 2010. It has to have 2,400 magazines in it. It has to show what an interactive magazine might look and feel like. It has to have a fully functioning international shop, be localized in 20 languages, ready to go. And let's do that all in 6 weeks. So this is sort of was my trial by fire, I think, at Zinio. And also, and interestingly, it was how we all started getting used to the idea of designing for capacitive multi-touch and designing for this crazy new UI with really no idea of how people were going to interact with these devices. So this is sort of our little recipe for how we figured out we would do this. We really did have these iPads in a room and a group of Cocoa engineers and UX designers and visual designers, and just pretty much trapped there during this time to figure out what we feel like we could design and build and release in that time frame. So all your sort of assumptions about good software development methodologies kind of go out the window right away, of course, just because of the time frame. So, I mean, like, we tried to stay agile and we tried to use our best practices, but really what happened is things just went crazy, and we made it. But the application sort of had 4 components. It had an app, which is to say, there's a container for the software, there's a reader, we wanted to do some interactive content, we wanted it to all be powered by a localized store. So we began, actually before we had an iPad in our hands, which we only got about, I think, maybe 3 weeks before the iPad came out, with a series of facing whiteboards, and began building prototypes. In fact, predicting as much as we knew about the iPad, we built foam core prototypes for the iPad. So you would see these unfortunate looking experienced designers and people like myself holding up foam core iPads and gesturing at them, which was always a lot of fun. So you see people with kind of jazz hands gesturing at little pieces of foam. But it really helped a lot to kind of sit down, especially when we started proofing the UI and building these paper prototypes, imagining how people were going to interact with these tablet computers that we knew were going to change our business, certainly, and change media a lot. So really the dueling whiteboards had to do with this thing where when we get all the people like myself who want to boil the ocean, we get a lot of engineers who want to and get in a room, we put it all up on a whiteboard and we start deciding what is absolutely essential for this app to go live on April 3rd. What can the app not do in this short amount of time? And it's a pretty fun sort of negotiation, particularly like while we're engineering on top of design. So as I suggested, paper prototypes were very helpful, and that helped us a lot. We built what I consider to be a sort of common lexicon. That means when you have room full of under-rested and grumpy Cocoa developers and designers talking. We have to kind of agree on a language that we use so that we're all not screaming and yelling at each other over caffeinated. And then lastly, the big thing was including people that had a long history in web design is really throwing a lot of what we consider to be best practices and a lot of our modes out the window when we begin to look at the tablet computer and how people are going to interact with it. So even for me, it was really my debut designing for capacitive multi-touch and designing for touch interface, which was a lot of fun. That means that every time we try to solve a problem, first we solve what's the user trying to do, what problem are they trying to solve. Now how are they going to solve it on a 9-inch tablet device with their fingers. So this is where we begin to build a gesture map that helps people understand. Like we kind of coach the UI with contextual help, and we build a gesture map that we think makes sense and it's intuitive to people. Next is, obviously there were a lot of opportunities for us to kind of decide what good frameworks would be, both for publishers and magazine publishers and people who wanted to do, to read. We kind of built a pretty sort of basic information architecture that we think people could navigate. And then when we go back to the publishers, particularly for publishers for whom we were doing performing a lot of creative services and helping them kind of advance their interactive editions, we had to kind of communicate back to the publisher. They were all kind of wading in a little bit, when you have people in the rooms of Condé Nast and Hearst and all these, where you have the editors and the art directors in one room and the digital people in another room. These people have, in some cases, never talked ever until now. So it's pretty interesting. And so in the end, what we really wanted to have was a place where you could explore great content. You could read the magazines that you love, and you can shop from magazines all around the world. Then, of course, you'd have a reading experience on top of that, which we intended to be linear and keep everything that people like about the magazine. Lastly, we had a group of publishers before we debuted that wanted to do something special on the iPad, so we picked, I think, 8 publishers, including the Rolling Stone, Car and Driver, National Geographic, and put together interactive editions for each one of those publishers. This is an example of where none of these guys were building these woodwing, dynamic magazines at the time. There was no such company. But in our world, what we did is we found a way in 6 weeks of taking that traditional PDF and layering interactive content on top of it. This is an example of Rolling Stone Top 500 Songs of All Times, wherein you can listen to a song directly in iTunes from the magazine. And lastly, the app would have a shop. As we mentioned, we have something like 75,000 SKUs, 7,000 titles. They're from 50 countries and in 30 languages, so that proposed something of a problem for us. Maybe that's why I chose this dangerous-looking genetically modified hamster to represent our store here. But inevitably, we actually made it. No surprise, we got there on April 3rd and the app debuted. You're never really done developing software in any environment, but certainly not in our environment. It's very fast, and we're basically we update our app, I think, every 3 weeks, every 4 weeks. It'll be a bug, it'll be a new feature, it'll be something that we think improves the user experience, but you're really never done designing, you're never done developing for us. Just the same, that it was a long road kind of getting there, but it gave us a lot of insights along the way of how we thought not only our app would be, but what magazines might be like, not just on Zinio, but for all the plethora of great reading apps and sort of new apps that have come and made editorial content so beautiful on the iPad. So we started to think, what would be the information design of the magazine? How could the magazine itself just structurally be better on an iPad? We have this idea of all these things, from layout, navigation, interactivity, social connectivity. What do people want in a magazine? And all these things we begin to consider. So we start with what helps most publishers is the idea of a traditional magazine being represented that's linear. It has 100 to 300 pages, and you read it from beginning to end. And that's what you'll see a lot of. But you start seeing other magazines where they, as you may have seen, I think Wired debuted, and now it's been widely imitated. We call it the icicle reader. This is where you can skip an article by going left to right and read an article by going up and down. Some people find it, disorienting. Some of those magazines are largely reducted. But in any way, the goal is at least to make the magazine readable and consumable on the iPad. In a more visual universe, if you were, let's say, a magazine for shopping or art-driven, you could use a traditional grid, and we're beginning to see a lot of that. Basically every time when you actually watch a person read a magazine, you can sit over someone's shoulder in a usability lab and watch a person. They'll jump to the table of contents, they'll go to an article, they go back to the table of contents. There are very few people that read a magazine from cover to cover. And so in the digital world, that gives us a lot of opportunities to, what we think, solve problems for the discoverability of content information. This is basically just sort of a visual exploration. We started, figuring out what this was going to look like and how this was going to feel. We started kind of testing this on our, wives and cousins and mothers and so forth. But we made it a long way. I commented briefly that one of our big assumptions was that in the magazine world, maybe the first year of this, there's been a notion that putting rich media into a magazine would make it interactive, and we've always kind of discounted this. You really just watch a video. We think you should be able, when you go and open up a magazine, you should be able to share it the same way you share a print magazine without having to give someone your $700 iPad. So in that way, the print edition is more tactile, and we want to solve that problem. We think you should be able to tear it out. You like something, you should be like the skateboard pictures on my wall. You should be able to tear out a page that you like. You should be able to save something. Remember, you should be able to fold the corner and leave a dog ear the same way you can in a print magazine. All these are ways in which the print magazine continue to be more tactile than the digital edition. As though by magic for advertisers, you can only see a product in a print magazine. There's no reason why you shouldn't be able to shop for a product in a digital magazine. The same thing is true just when you look at like a publisher that has this extraordinary history of information, like a Rolling Stone or National Geographic or Science or any of these magazines with an extraordinary wealth of content. There's no reason why that content can't be sourced on the iPad and why we can't relate articles and themes and stories to complex semantic information. We feel like all those things should be possible on the iPad. And lastly, certainly one of my favorite examples is you should be able to customize it. Like the idea that print edition, there's something maybe interesting that the print edition is the same thing and everyone can digest it and see it and talk about it, but there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to customize your magazine. Or train the magazine to know what you like, know what you want to read and how you want to find it. So really, in kind of looking away, we think that a lot of these tools, both in the iOS development world and also in the publishing tools world, that iPad publishing and digital publishing of tablet computers is going to be broadly democratized, and we're already seeing that. We're hoping that the magazine industry can sort of embrace the medium and embrace the device and get us to a place where we're happy. What we think is you start by breaking up that book. There's that idea that when you have a print magazine, that the second it leaves the newsstand, that it just basically becomes garbage or waste. I mean, all that content, particularly evergreen content, I think has an audience. So if you look at like years and years of back issues of National Geographic or a great art magazine or a design magazine, just never go away. So we want those stories to have an opportunity, and I think they can on a tablet computer. We want to break those books up. And I feel like we came up with these recommendations for anyone. If you were seeing this transformation, if you were a writer, a designer, an art director, or a publisher, we have really an opportunity to change the way that people interact with the medium. Understanding I have a few minutes left, I feel like that's all I wanted to talk about today. Thanks.
Questions?
I talk really fast. Sorry about that.
So I guess with the advent of iOS 5 coming out, that Apple's putting together their own newsstand, how does that affect your business? Are you aware of it? And how would you say you guys competitively differentiate yourselves?
Right. Well, there's a couple things, I suppose. In its earliest incarnations, I mean, I see in iOS 5 the newsstand as being sort of a glorified folder, but it's obviously that not only Apple, but Apple and Google and Amazon and Barnes and Noble, that the whole industry is heating up around the opportunity for magazines, and really that's great for us. The best thing in the world is that Zinio is proven in foresight. I mean, we were convinced in 2001 that we were going to have that tablet computers were going to change the way that people read magazines and books. We've been at it ever since, and And I think that really what's happening now is that the rest of the world, including the world's sort of largest technology and media companies, are finding out the same thing. So really, it's kind of created an office. We have a sort of a symbiosis with Apple in a way. Like, we need Apple, and like everyone else, and we love Apple, and they've changed our business, and they love what we do, and they simultaneously have their own vision of what a magazine might be like on their devices. But I don't know. I feel like it's complementary. Most importantly, if they have they're working with some premier publishers and premium publishers, the Hearsts and Condé Nasts of the world. They're having a lot harder time, obviously, developing relationships with hundreds of publishers worldwide like we have. So in that way, we're indispensable. But yeah, I don't know. It's complicated. That's kind of a hardball.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Well, I mean, it's sort of like.
I think it's great. It's sort of right now. I feel like we're just watching the industry materialize, and we're going to see a lot of stuff shake out. So all we're going to do is continue to try to make great apps and make applications that people love. And at least, think about it this way: if Apple really wanted to do some consolidation on the magazine front in the iTunes store, maybe we just like it while we're sitting there at like the #1 or #2 top grossing app on the iPad. We're gonna stick it there for a little while, see what happens.
So final question for now is, you touched on like rich media and how magazines aren't so interactive.
Sure.
What are your thoughts on, I mean, obviously you've probably heard of enhanced ebooks where they can show, video, YouTube clips, it's maybe not totally interactive, but it does have like a lot of elements.
Sure.
How do you, or do you have plans to like implement sort of an enhanced ebook version of like a magazine, or like what's the process involved?
It's an interesting space. There's sort of the view layer, which I deal a lot with, but on the back end, in the publishing tool space, there's certainly Adobe Tools, which has lower adoption, Woodwing, which has higher adoption with some of these magazines. Zinio has our own internal tools that we license to our publishers or provide to our publishers as a service. Really what the industry we think is missing right now are standards. EPUB was such a gift for digital books. The MP3 was such a gift for music, and really what we think the magazine industry lacks is a universal standard that makes it easier for people like Zinio to publish to multiple devices. So when we're developing, first we're dealing with Android, with the early fragmentation in Android, publishing to 4-inch, 7-inch, 10-inch devices, broadsheet, landscape.
Totally.
Dealing with magazines that themselves have variable aspect ratios, and some publishers are digitally savvy and give us beautiful Prism XML. Some guys give us, InDesign files and dust off their hands. I mean, it's sort of the Wild West right now, but I think that it makes it fun for me, but we're definitely we're part of the dialogue, at least, with the industry and with both the OEMs, the publishers, the app space on creating and evolving standards. So it's going to take a while to shake out, but that's where we see it going.
How about telling us a little more about Zinio, the company? For example, what's the head count? Where are the people? Are you profitable, etc.?
So Zinio, I think, including full-timers and some contract engineers, has about 200 feet on the ground worldwide. Some of those we're headquartered here in San Francisco, where we have around 80 people. We've got about 25 people in New York and about the same in Barcelona, where our European headquarters are. And then we have satellite sales offices in 5 continents. So there's a lot of us running around and causing trouble. We have a pretty sort of a tech-centric office in San Francisco and sort of a sales and publisher-centric office in New York. And so we have to kind of deal with 2 phenomenons in our business. Our publishers, who can be really helpful and supportive, can also be whimsical and capricious and complicated. We have great publishers, but we want to keep them happy. And we also have to deal with our landscape, which is it's a circus. We have rooms that are just covered with devices from floor to ceiling at Zinio. Some of them with no shells, and some of them will never see the light of day. Yeah, that's something like Zinio.
Are you profitable?
We're a privately held company, I think I'm supposed to take the Fifth Amendment on that. Yes, I think is the answer. I don't know. We make a lot of money and we spend a lot of money. I don't know.
That's how it is, you know.
For my CFO or something. And someone in the back there?
One of the major changes in version 2 of the Zinio app for iPad was a move to in-app purchasing.
Right.
A fairly drastic move to in-app purchasing. I mean, obviously that has driven the app up in terms of the top grossing apps that you've highlighted in your presentation, but that obviously led to a loss of user data and a move away from that sort of a single subscription, multiple device model. What was the reaction of the publishers that you're working with, and what's the future?
Yeah, man, that's a great question, and it's been crazy. The first thing is that all along it was my attitude that in-app purchasing was the right experience in our app. So when we launched the app, we built a web-based store, and of course, as some of you know, Apple, and as he was suggesting, Apple pulled the plug on that. However many 90, 120 days ago, I don't even remember. But we had a web-based store that allowed us to sort of control the consumer and own the consumer's payment information. My attitude was that it made it clumsy, and I thought it'd be a lot easier. I mean, everyone in this room knows their iTunes password, but not a lot of people have bought something using their credit card on a smartphone or on a tablet computer yet. So I saw having in-app purchases was a gift. Apple cut their teeth really early monetizing digital content, and they're brilliant at it. So they've got 300 million credit cards on file. So I was really happy when Apple thought it was a good idea to let us use their massive database of 300 million premier digital media consumers. Just the same, our publishers are wary because, and as some of you I'm sure know, the magazine industry is controlled by data and powered by advertising, and both Apple and Google to publishers are maybe sort of like frenemies. Their publishers approach Google. They know that, I mean, Google doesn't make a secret that they want to make all the world's information freely available. And the whole idea of a magazine is scarcity. I would say that our publishers approached it warily, but we've managed, at least despite that Apple owns the purchase at the point of sale, which again I think is great, we continue to own all those customers. So we still can message our customers and talk to them and build loyalty around them. And really where we're heading this fall, I think, and as you can probably predict, is we want to build everything that we're doing in standalone pure HTML5 and CSS. So we're working really hard now on building everything that we do for mobile web. And it won't be the only experience, we're just going to hedge our bets. Right now we see iOS, Android, and HTML5 as being the big bets that we want to double down on, and we love that it's as competitive as it is because it's really just good for us. Oh, and there's one detail. We believe that Zinio was the top grossing app for iPad all along, and before in-app purchases was just the first time that we would register as the top grossing app for iPad because finally they could see our goodies.
Time for one more question, if there is one.
I have one last question.
Michael?
Yep. So, I guess a lot of the overall theme here has been HTML5 and how that's becoming more popular in a way to like deliver content. Amazon recently did like their Cloud Reader app, and other companies are following suit. Primarily, it's because they don't want to give Apple that percentage of each sale because, you know, if you're like an Amazon, you're flipping in such volume that Apple's just going to make like a copious amount of money from you. Do you see, with the advent of HTML5 and the different types of, you know, like developing for Android's like a nightmare. All the different versions, all the different screens, ice cream sandwich, honeycomb. I mean, you know, it's a nightmare. Do you see almost the death of the dedicated app in switching to like a pure HTML5 platform where you only really have to really develop that one HTML5 site that everyone will just connect to?
Right. I think it for us is going to be a combination of things for a while. The first is that for now, people like apps, and it's just cultural, and I think it's a lifestyle basis right now. People like apps, and it's how people discover things and how you might discover Zinio. The app isn't sort of it's more of a widget and less of a destination. So while HTML5 and CSS sort of develops and while we solve problems like offline states and DRM and various problems with caching and interactivity and all these things that we can do so elegantly in Cocoa, we're going to kind of hedge our bets, like I suggested. I don't think it has to kill apps, but I definitely think that if apps are your strategy, you probably don't have a strategy. I mean, you really have to. The idea that your whole brand, your products, and your user experience would have this enormous dependency on someone as mercurial and powerful as Apple doesn't seem like a very good strategy to me. So yeah, I mean, I feel like what's going to happen is that certainly if I was a betting man, I'd pay really close attention to what's possible in HTML5, and certainly that's where we're putting our money. But we're happy to watch it kind of shake out.
Cool.
Great.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.